I remember back when I was a brand new white belt, I was not able to sit on my heels whenever I first started. I remember my ankles were not very flexible, my quads felt very tight, and so this made it very difficult for me to sit into the guard and sit in some main positions. Today, I want to share with you guys a few things that I did and strategies that you can do in order to be a little bit more comfortable being able to sit on your heels and to be able to have a little bit maybe more success during your training. How's it going, everyone? My name is Chasen Hill. I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt who's been teaching and training now for over 15 years. So if you guys like all things jiu-jitsu, make sure you give this video a like. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That way you never miss the latest video whenever it comes out. The reason for me of why this was difficult sitting on my heels had to do with actually more my ankles than my quads. I was actually born with something known as clubbed feet, where I was learning to walk on the sides of my feet. And so at the age of around 2, I had reconstructive surgery on both of my feet. And I'll try to put a picture up on screen here, but I actually still have scars that go around both of my feet where you can clearly see where they had to cut open both of my feet. I never considered, whenever I started training jiu-jitsu, was my ankle flexibility. You know, I was 18 years old whenever I first started training. So the lowest that I could probably sit when I very first started was probably like about here. This is as low as I could go. And it wasn't because I was too tight in my quads per se, but it was because my ankles, right, this part right here, this space right underneath was very tight. I could not like point my toe enough. But now to this day, I can actually be able to sit all the way down. I got submitted a lot. I got swept a lot because of my ability to not sit on my heels. And a funny story is I remember the very first competition I ever did. I was a white belt. I'd been training for maybe like 6 months, and the guy came out and pulled guard. When he pulled guard, I'm sitting inside someone's guard like this, like elevated, like what you're not supposed to do. And I was here, I kept getting pulled forward, I kept getting pulled down. And then my coach is yelling from the corner, sit down, sit on your heels. And I remember I turned and looked at him and I go, I can't, because I could, that's like as low as I could go. And he was like, oh, I ended up, I think, getting triangled that match because every time I was sitting up, I kept getting pulled forward, and it was easy for the person to eventually shoot their leg over my neck. So some of the reasons of why you should spend some time being able to learn how to sit on your heels are for benefits like that. If you ever get put inside of someone's close guard, you need to know how to sit in what we call posture and be able to defend and play. This is probably one of the most common frustrations that I've had to help students overcome or like encourage them to be able to do. You know, the people who I teach and train that I mainly teach on a daily basis are your average individual people. They are 40 to 50 years old. They have a family, they have a full-time job. They maybe lift weights, but they don't do any activities like this. Like unless you do jiu-jitsu, sitting on the floor like this isn't something that people have done since they were a kid. It's something they've not done in a long time. When I tell them, hey, I want you to work on this, they kind of look at me like I'm never gonna be able to do that. And then I tell them my story when I had reconstructive feet, and it took me about 6 solid years of training and just getting used to going into this motion until I could sit like this comfortably. Being able to learn how to sit like this, it may not be the most comfortable thing, it may not be the quickest thing that you'll ever be able to do, but it's something that you must be able to overcome, and you need to figure it out. Even if it takes you 10 years, so what? Stop giving me the excuses that you can't do it. You can do it if I can do it. With a guy who has 2 crippled feet, even still to this day, I can do it. So you can too. So what are some things that I did to actually be able to get to this part? I really just made a conscious effort of spending time in like time intervals of sitting in that position. So I know it's not sounding really, really sexy. After I'd lift weights or I would do any kind of routine exercise, when my body was already warmed up, I would grab like a yoga mat and put it off to the side of the gym. And then I would set a timer for 30 seconds and I would literally go as low as I could. I would hold it for 30 seconds and then I would come back out and I would break again. And then I would do it again and I would sit as low as I could for 30 seconds and I would come back out again. I would do that like 5, 6, 7 sets until I felt like I improved a little bit. The other thing that seemed to help me quite a bit was actually doing just regular calf raises on a routine, because for my ankle, I could not do what's called plantar flexion or dorsiflexion. Like mine is very limited range of motion where you point your toe like a ballerina and then you pull your toes to your nose. The other thing is taking it through motion. So meaning that when I'm sitting in this position, I point my toes like this, and then I would just sit as low as I could, and I would come back up. And then I would sit as low as I could, and then come back up. And I was thinking about keeping my abs tight and pushing my hips forward. I prefer to point my toes. I don't prefer to do this where I flex my toes and I sit back. To me, that actually hurts my toes. I don't have very big toes, so that's why I don't really have like a kickstand toe like some people with your goon level toe right there that's like super long. Your guys' toes, you can do that and that feels comfortable for you. As I came out, I would come up, come down and come up, and that really helped more with like my quads. So I would do the static holds more for my ankles, and then I would come up more with my quads. And I would just do this position over and over and over again to kind of get warmed up, and that would really seem to help. Now, let's talk about the training actual aspect. What I really started to do is anytime anyone put me in guard, right, I would try to sit as low as I could, and I'll turn around this way so you guys can see my good side here, is I would actually cross my feet over one another like this. So I would cross, and that gave me kind of like a little booster on my heel right here. It's really a personal preference, right? This doesn't feel great for me because my right foot is a little bit less flexible, a little bit less range of motion than my other foot. So that kind of helps me. So when I would sit in the guard, like if I had to be in the guard, I gave myself a little bit of booster versus pointed. Now today, I could sit like this, right? I could sit here, but to me, that's not as comfortable. My point with this is you gotta find a way that's actually comfortable for you to sit, okay? You have to find a way. So you play with it, change it up, and here. And then once I found that comfortability, what I would start doing is if I couldn't sit like this, I would then bury my head into people's chest and keep my hands on the inside. And I called it safe hands or annoying hands, where I would put my hands basically on their shoulders and I would just defend. I would keep my ear glued to their chest. And then whenever I felt their head, my head come free, I would then work on posturing and sitting into this position. Because what I noticed is if I just tried to sit in posture from the get-go because I didn't sit low enough, it actually hurt and it was way worse, and I would get submitted a lot more. Instead, what I started doing was burying my head down and denying and waiting, and then once I felt my head get free or I would free it, then I would start to posture and sit, and then I would start to break the guard, or I would start to open up my foot to start to uncross. And then that's kind of how I started developing that skill of being able to sit here. It wasn't like after a year, I was able to sit into this position and everything was perfect. No, it took a while to get good at it. I had to find my own strategy. I had to develop kind of my own way of training in order to really figure it out. And that's what's beautiful about jiu-jitsu. Anyone can do it if you put in the time and the effort and you stay going. If you don't care about being the best in the world and you have to concede and make sacrifices for what you can do, great. I don't care. I want jiu-jitsu to grow. I want more people to be in jiu-jitsu. So yes, even if sitting like this is the most optimal way, according to jiu-jitsu experts, but if you can't do it, don't let it discourage you figure out what works for you, and then as you're continuing to train, you will eventually be able to get there. I also think this is a problem with jiu-jitsu coaches. They're not patient. Most coaches aren't patient in working with the student and telling them it's okay, let's build up, or they just ignore that student, then they go to the one that has a little bit more talent per se. And I understand if you're trying to build world champions and you only have so many hours in the day, I don't want to deal with this 50-year-old that's got flexibility issues and I don't want to work with him. That's totally okay. That's your choice and your decision of what you want your coaching legacy to be and who you want to coach. That's just not who I coach. I coach majority of average people, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of just being able to teach a student how to sit this and how to find a comfortable spot and work with them and watch them grow and evolve over time. It lets them have a positive relationship with jiu-jitsu versus having such a negative relationship like, oh, I can't do it. Oh, jiu-jitsu is not for me. Oh, these guys are so much better. And you get very Eeyore about it. If sitting in the guard is a problem for you, figure it out. I promise you, you can do it. So I'm not trying to sound mean or obnoxious, but if a guy that's had reconstructive feet surgery can figure it out, I think you can too. Stay with it, stay after it, and good luck.